delicious dinners out here this afternoon. Yes, ain't there? Why, you lovely thing, where have you been all my life? Say, do you think I can take the keys for one of you girls there? Huh? Where's that? Well, all right then, baby. I'm with you 100%. Come here, I want to tell you something. Every honeybee feels jealousy when they see you out with me. Don't blame them, goodness knows. Honeysuckle rose. When you pass my flowers through the side, I know the reason why. You're much sweeter, goodness knows. Honeysuckle rose. I don't buy sugar. You just have to touch my cup. You're my sugar. So sweet when you stir it up. When I'm taking those sips from your lips, does the honey drip? Mercy. Perfection? Goodness knows. You my honeysuckle rose. Yeah. Say, every honeybee feels jealousy when you see out with me. Don't blame them, goodness knows. Honeysuckle rose. When you pass my flowers through the side, know the reason why. You're much sweeter, goodness knows. Honeysuckle rose. I don't buy sugar. You just have to touch my cup. You're my sugar. So sweet when you stir it up. When I'm take those sips from your lips, does the honey drip? Confection, goodness knows. Honeysuckle rose. Our confection doesn't drip, yeah. You're my baby, my sugar, honeysuckle rose. Uh-huh.
Okay, everyone, welcome to the next, I should say, fifth and final lecture for improv for this class. That tune was Honeysuckle Rose, a classic jazz tune written by Fats Waller, a very famous performer and composer of the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. He was a piano player and a singer. That was him, as you heard. And his song Honeysuckle Rose was a classic, a standard. It was a hit back in the 30s, it was a hit in the 40s, and it has been played by jazz musicians for the last 80, 70 years. We're going to talk about this tune a little bit today. Why, you ask? Because I know you're sick and tired of I've Got Rhythm. But fear not, we are going to also do I've Got Rhythm at the end of this lecture. And I'll be doing mostly playing, a little bit of talking about it, but I want you to listen to the ideas that we have talked about through this semester and last, I've talked about, I should say, about how to approach improvising on a particular piece of music. The reason that I played Honeysuckle Rose for you is that it has many things in common with I've Got Rhythm. Now, what you heard there was that first recording was of Fats Waller himself. Fats Waller, as a pianist, he was famous for a style called stride piano. And stride piano was, if you remember the lecture when we talked a bit, I reminded you a bit of again, I think of ragtime, and I was explaining that ragtime music was a combination of the left hand doing some very even rhythms, accompaniment rhythms, while the right hand was syncopating the melody. And these two very different rhythmic concepts were kind of melded together in music that became ragtime music. I know you remember all that. Well, stride piano took that ragtime left hand, and instead of just going back and forth evenly within an octave, let's say, the little finger would hit a bass note, and then the hand would jump a whole foot to a chord up here. It would hit the bass note here, and then the chord up here, skipping this much of the piano, skipping sometimes as much as 2 octaves. And when the piano player, especially Fats Waller, did this in tempo, his left hand looked like this. If you can see it, I don't know where the camera is, but let's just pretend that's where it is. The left hand would be down here, it would play the bass note, and then the offbeat would be almost 2 octaves away. The hand was making giant strides, get it? Strides from the low note to the chord up here. Meanwhile, the improvisation was happening with the right hand. Stride piano was a very important part of early jazz accompaniment, and Fats Waller was one of the first people to specialize in it. So if you ever do see old home movies of Fats Waller, and he died fairly young. He died, I think, in the early 40s, and he was born, I think he was in his late 30s when he died altogether. You'll see this hand making this huge leap from little finger left hand to the chord up here, making a big stride, and that's why it was called stride piano. And like I say, this Honeysuckle Rose was one of many hits that he had, hits of the day that have carried over to many jazz players into the 21st century. What I thought I would do is show you on this sheet music of the tune how these chord changes work. What I did, by the way, when I played the whole song in real time using the chord symbols and the form, the shape of that song. It's a 32-bar song. I played it without rhythm section, but I kept the time as if there were a rhythm section going in my head. Theoretically, and I'll listen to this or look at it later, theoretically I didn't get faster, I didn't slow down, I picked a tempo and stayed right there as if there were a rhythm section with me. I followed the changes, I improvised on the changes, and then I took it right out without any last chord or any last note. Or stinger, let's say, just ended quickly. But I was playing on the form with those changes all the way through that little a cappella improvisation. Now let me just show you the changes of this song, Honeysuckle Rose. Fats Waller. When was it written? Doesn't say. 1927. 1927. Okay, this lead sheet, and this also will go back to another lecture. This lead sheet was taken from a real book, but not the real book we talked about. Remember I told you that there was a legal real book published about 25 years ago called The New Real Book, and this printing, this lead sheet is from the New Real Book. The quality of the copy, the quality of the musical notation, the font is much more sophisticated than the real book we talked about. Now, I'm hoping, for the last lectures, you know, my brother Kevin is doing this, so I'm hoping he is zooming in on this so you can see the changes as I point them out to you. Like all real book or lead sheet music, this one only has the melody, which you can see. Da 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 da, just the notes. The lyrics, because this one did have lyrics, you heard Fats Waller singing them, and the chord symbols. Now let's look at the first thing you look at when you look at a piece of lead sheet music like this. You look at the key signature, 1 flat. So what is the key of 1 flat? Well, you remember we had sentences if you need them. Farmer Brown eats apple dumplings greedily is the flat sentence. Farmer is the first word. Farmer begins with F, so the key of 1 flat is F. The F major scale, the key of F, 1 flat. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. If you start on F and you use that formula, as we've done millions of times, you'll discover this. The F major scale is F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. You need that B flat in there if you start on the note F and want to make a major scale out of it. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. This song is in the key of F. Now let's look at those chord symbols. What was I playing on? What was I thinking when I was improvising on that? Well, the first chord symbol is a G minor 7. The next chord symbol is a C7. That C7 should give you a clue. There's only one dominant 7 in a key. So C7 is the dominant 7 in what key? Major, minor, minor, major, dominant. C7 is the 5 chord in the key of F. So the first chord is in the key of F, the second chord is in the key of F, and then we have those repetition marks, the repeat marks. So the first 4 measures is in the key of F. And you know what that means? You can play up and down the F major scale and not hit a wrong note. You aren't going to be particularly creative necessarily, but at least you're not hitting a wrong note, and believe me, that's all you want to do when we get started on a tune. Let's look at the second line, F6. Now we haven't talked about a chord symbol called F6, but it's very simple. You can figure it out. If a chord has a root, a third, and a fifth, F, A, C, and then we usually go to dominant 7s, F, A, C, E. If you see F6, that means the top note of this chord is just 6 steps ahead of the 6 steps up from the root. F, A, C, D, that's what that F6 means. F7 is kind of you're still F-ish, remember, and B flat 6 is the 4 chord. Then you have a C7, which is the 5 chord, and you'll discover, with the exception of that little chord right there, D7, and we're going to ignore it, that chord, D7, which is not in the key of F, every other one of these chords is in the key of F. And then, if you remember, A, B, A, that's the form of this song, just as it is the form of I've Got Rhythm. The first 8 measures repeat exactly, which means this whole 16 bars is F-ish. It's based on the F major scale. It's based on major, minor, minor, major, dominant, minor, minor, 7 flat 5 in the F major scale, which means theoretically you could play up and down the F major scale for 16 measures and not hit a wrong note. Just like I've Got Rhythm, except in I've Got Rhythm, we're in the key of B flat. Okay, first 16 measures, very F-ish. Now we come to this part, the B part, and you remember this is called the bridge. When you have a 32 measure song with the first 16 measures the same, repeating the first 8 bars, the new music comes starting on the 17th bar, and it's the same with this song. But let's look at these symbols. F7 is a 5 chord. There's only one 5 chord per key. So F7 is the 5 chord in what key? B flat. So these 4 measures, and look at the chords. F7 is a 5 chord, C minor 7 the 2 chord, F7 the 5 again, B flat the 1 chord, major, minor, minor, major. The next 4 lines, the 17th through the 21st measure, is all in B flat. Now let's go to the last 4 bars of the bridge, the middle part. You have a G7. That should give you a clue. G7 is only found in what key? C. You know that. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G7, 5th chord built on the key of C. G7 goes to C7. Now this is a little bit of a trick. C7 is not in the key of C, but C7 is the 5 chord of the key of F. And we're right back for the last 8 bars in the key of F. Now, what does this mean? And by the way, I have no idea how fast I'm talking. I could be talking miles a minute here. I'm just going on. I'm hoping you're understanding me. What this fundamentally means is that for the first 16 bars, I'm kind of playing in F-ishness. For the first 4 bars of the bridge, I'm playing in B flat. For the bars of the last 4 bars of the bridge, I'm kind of playing C-ishly. And C-ishly will take me back to F. And the last 8 bars are in F. In other words, it's possible to simplify this song, which probably most of you do not know or have never heard of, but suddenly you can see that it's very much like I've Got Rhythm. And as I've mentioned when we talked about I've Got Rhythm, and we will get to I've Got Rhythm at the end of this lecture, but when we've talked about it, we want to break it down to lowest common denominators harmonically. And the lowest common denominators in this song, Honeysuckle Rose, which you've heard the composer play, and you heard me play, the lowest common denominators are F, B flat, and C. That's fundamentally what this song is made up of, those fundamental keys. Now, you might be thinking, and hopefully you are, well, G minor 7, there are notes in a G minor 7 chord. Should we know those notes? Should we learn them? Is it that simple? I can just play F around F and that F major scale and it'll be right? Well, yes, you should know these chords. It's part of what I do. I know these chords. G, B flat, D, F, C, E, G, B flat, F, A, C, D. By the way, here's a symbol you haven't seen. I don't know how close you can see this, but there's an F7 with a slash under the F7 and then the letter A. I don't know if you can see this. Hopefully you can. I'm pointing to it. I will also scan this music and send it to you email-wise, so you'll have a chance to look at it close or even print it out yourselves after you've had a chance to watch this lecture. F7, or any chord symbol with a slash under it and then a letter. For example, this says F7 slash A. The A is under the slash, the A is under the F7. It still means a regular old F7 chord, F, A, C, E flat. That slash with the A is simply telling the bass player, don't play F, play A. This is basically giving an instruction to the bass player or a piano player who's playing the bass notes with his or her left hand. Usually when you see an F7, the bass player would play an F. In this case, the bass player plays an A because the composer is giving the bass player a nice little line to play. The bass player's line would be F, A, B flat, C. It just is a musical approach to it. And this is a way for a chord symbol just to tell the bass player what to do. As I'm looking at everything else here, you know every chord symbol here, now that I've told you what the 6 is. A chord with a 6 above it or next to it instead of a 7 simply means the top note is the 6th note above the root. F, A, C, C's the 5th note. If the chord symbol is F6, the top note is going to be a D. F, A, C, D. We used to call 6 chords vanilla chords. They're very benign, they're very consonant, they sound very sweet. They're not nearly as interesting as the major 7s. But they do exist, and they certainly existed back when this song was written 80 years ago. Okay, now, what do I have to tell you beyond that? Well, let me just review it a little bit, and then I'm going to play this song with the rhythm section. A track. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to play before I do it, and then I will talk loudly while this track is playing. I'll stop playing the soprano and explain what you may be hearing or what you're going to hear or what you have heard. But I'm going to play the melody twice as if this were a final project. In fact, I'm not going to play the melody twice. I'll play the melody one time because this is a 32-bar song. You don't have to repeat that song in order for the audience to get it in their ears. Remember, an AABA song has many repetitions in it already. The first 8 bars repeats immediately when you get to the second 8 bars. So the only reason you repeat a song is if it's so short that the audience might need just a little extra version of it so that they get it into their ears while they're waiting for you to improvise. Which is why, whenever we play blues music and we talk about final projects, I ask you to play the melody of a blues twice before you start to improvise. Why? Because a blues is only 12 bars long. The melody is over before you know it. So it's a good thing to play a blues melody 2 times, get it established in the audience's ear before you take off on your improvisation. This is a 32-bar song, so you don't have to play it twice. It's long enough. 1 chorus is enough. I'm going to play the melody once with the track, so you'll get it in your ear. You've already heard it once with me playing it. You've heard it with Fats Waller singing it and playing it. Also, if you notice, Fats Waller, once he was through singing the melody and playing it on the piano, he had a guitar soloist that played a few bars of it, and 16 bars, and then a saxophone solo came in and played the bridge, the middle part, and then Fats Waller went back to it. He played with the song just as if it were a final project. It wasn't that he did 5 straight choruses. He had somebody do a little bit of that, and somebody do a little bit of this, then he sang a little bit of that, and then he played a little bit of this. He played with it, and he came up with a form that was his final project song, kind of. All right, let me get this thing set up here, hopefully. I'll play the melody. Wait a minute here, whoops. Okay. And let me make sure my reed, here's the panic that every saxophone player goes through. Has my reed dried out to the point that when I start to play, nothing will happen. So I'm just going to make sure it hasn't. Okay, good. Now you don't need to look at this sheet music anymore. I will send it to you, so you can use it as a reference when you watch this video, this lecture, or when you go back to watch it after you've watched it 57 times. Here is Honeysuckle Rose. Now I've told you that it's fundamentally F-ish, B-flat-ish, C-ish, and then F-ish. And so when I first start to play, in fact, I'll stop the track, so you'll know. I'll play the melody, then I'm going to start to play a solo, then I'll stop and explain it. Here we go. And what you'll hear is bass, walking bass, drums, and piano, comping. And hopefully you'll hear this a little bit better than maybe you did in the earlier lectures. Okay, let me just push in a little bit. Here we go. I will get the count off from the track. You'll hear it. that was a 32-bar solo of Honeysuckle Rose. Was it interesting? I thought so. I thought it was incredibly interesting. The only thing that wasn't too interesting about it was 3 major scales, up and down. No creativity at all, but not a wrong note to be heard, and there were only 3 major scales. The first 8 bars, which are G minor 7, C7, G minor 7, C7, F6, F7, B flat 6, all those chords that sound so scary. Here's what the scale is. Now, what does this prove? It proves I know my major scales. And there are only 12. And if you play jazz music, you're going to discover there's only 5 or 6 or 7, because nobody ever plays blues in F sharp or songs in B major, those with all the sharps or flats. If I know my, in this case, F major scale, B flat major scale, and C major scale, I've played an entire chorus without one wrong note. That is, I played F-ishly and B-flatishly and C-ishly. And I was able to diagnose the changes to show me that all these chord symbols, these and these, and I'm pointing, you're not even looking at it, don't worry about it. All these symbols are part of that scale. That's why that major scales are like those pictures I talked about in Highlights magazine for children. The one with the house and the leaves and the trees and the clouds. And the thing is, the question is, find the rabbits. And the rabbits are all hiding within the trees and the clouds and the bushes. The artist has drawn them in. Well, here, I'm telling you that I'm playing the F major scale, but in fact, I'm really playing G minor 7, C7, B flat 7. I mean, all of these chords are hiding within that simple scale. Now, was that a beautiful chorus? It was only beautiful in the sense, that improvised thing that I just did, it was only beautiful in the sense that there wasn't a wrong note. There was not a wrong note to it. I was totally correct and totally uninteresting. In a way, this is off the record now, one of the reasons that people used to joke about the playing of Kenny G is that Kenny G used to use scales, specific scales in his solos so specifically that you could listen to a Kenny G chorus and say, boy, doesn't he know his C pentatonic, and doesn't he know his F blues scale. And as an artist or a jazz musician, you don't want to have your raw material be spelled out to you like that. What you want to use is use your raw material, that F major scale, to build your own ideas, not simply repeat the scale over and over to show you got chops on that scale. And I'm not putting Kenny G down. But in the early days, and maybe and probably today too, he would solo, and in the middle of his solo, he would do something like this. Now, fantastic. A lot of technique, a lot of chops. But every time I heard him solo doing that type of thing, I'd say, boy, he knows his C pentatonic scale. And you know your C pentatonic scale too. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So here's what Kenny G does. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, pentatonic scale. You don't want to have your scales stick out as the root of your raw material when you improvise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to improvise now for real. This thing hopefully is queued up to the next chorus of Honeysuckle Rose. I'm not going to play the melody. I'm going to literally improvise on those symbols, but hopefully I'm going to come up with ideas that allow me to use my raw material, my F-ishness, my knowledge of G minor 7 and C7 and F6, my knowledge of these things, but to use it in a way that a solo comes out as sounding like something I haven't played before, something that I have created on the spot. Does it mean it's going to be good or interesting? I don't know. I'm making it up on the spot. But I will play, and you'll be able to hear, because I don't know if you don't know the song well enough to know if I know you'll hear it or not. But I'm going to do a real straight ahead improvisation on these changes, using what I hope will be ideas. Do I know what I'm going to do when I start? I have no idea. I will be as surprised as you at what happens when I start to play with this. But then I'll be listening to what I'm playing, just like you will be, and hopefully whatever I play will be the catalyst for the next thing I play, or be the jumping off point for an idea that I might be able to get developing. I'm going to try to do that development on purpose, but I just don't want it to stick out as if I were playing from my scale repertoire. Okay? Hopefully this thing is going to start right in the downbeat, and I'll just start to improvise. I'll play a little bit of the melody first so you'll recognize where I am in it. Then I'll ease off into an improvisation. Here we go. Now, a couple of things that I was trying to do. Again, I had no idea in advance of anything. I was totally going the direction that this solo took me. It's just like you're not really in control of it. You're playing within certain boundaries with certain parameters, but I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But when I played two choruses, the second chorus, somehow some judgment call was made in my brain. I always call it the third eye. I have a third eye watching over me that looks down and warns me of things. For example, certain tunes are harder to play than others. If you went to the famous Mike Monaghan concert, you know that we did Giant Steps, a John Coltrane song, which is very, very hard. And when you do that song, your third eye never stops being in communication with you, because it's like playing through a minefield. And your third eye, my third eye, is saying, be careful of this, be careful of that. What my third eye said in those two choruses I just improvised was, at the end of my first improvised chorus, my third eye said, well, you know, that was pretty much straight ahead. What else do you have in your bag of tricks? Oh, you haven't done any double time fast figures. You haven't done anything that involved your technique. And it said, why don't you try that now? It's very subconscious, this third eye, so I think I'll now do that. But something was guiding me to do that, just to change the pace a little bit, especially if you end up playing 3 or 4 or 5 choruses, which you sometimes do as a professional. You're looking for ways to make it as varied and as interesting as possible. So I did. I started the double time. I have the chops to do it. I have the technique, something I've developed over 87 years of practice. So I have that, it's in my bag of tricks. Remember, every instrument has its own bag of tricks. There are things you can do on the alto that you can't do on the trumpet. And there are things that vocalists can do that horn players can't do. There are things that you can do on the piano. Again, I'm pointing to you various people, you know. Anthony and Nick, Manny, Carrie, Sydney, Ollie, Adam. Hope I did that all right. Oh, wait. Yes, I did. I did right. That's okay. Anthony's here over there. Good. Adam. There are things that every instrument can do that other instruments can't do. The saxophone is one of the most flexible instruments, so it can just, there's a million things the saxophone can do to make a solo interesting. But there are many things that all of the instruments, whatever your specialty is, there are things that you can do that your fellow jazz musicians can't do on their instruments, and there are things that they can do on their instruments that you can't do. Now, I won't play the track again, or will I? Yes, I will, just to make one more point. When we talked about I've Got Rhythm the last time, I mentioned that you can play the melody and improvise throughout the melody without changing the melody much. In other words, you could play with the melody, adding little ornaments, a little exaggerations, a little filigree, to make the melody different every time you play it. And yet you're still playing the melody. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go back to the beginning of this. I'm just going to play one chorus of the melody, but I'm going to play with it. I did this a little bit in our last lecture, but I'm going to do it a little more specifically this time. You'll be able to tell. You're starting to learn this melody. By the way, if this were your project song, or if this was a song you wanted to learn to play, you'd go on YouTube and find it 100 different times, with 100 different performers, and the more you listen to it, the more you absorb it, the more you internalize it, the more you get it into your system, and that's the way you want to learn a tune when you know you're going to be improvising on it. You want to get it into your system. You want to internalize it. And how do you do that? Listen to it a lot. Listen to it with many artists. When I put Fats Waller, and what was that thing that he invented on the piano? Come on. Anthony, what was the thing he invented? Stride piano. When you get, he wrote it, but there are many other artists that do Honeysuckle Rose and have played it right up into the 21st century. So I'm going to play the melody just one more time for you, but I'm going to extemporize around the melody. You'll always hear the melody, but you'll see that I'm adding little tricks. Here we go. And I'll wait for the count off. Hit it, boys. You could hear that I was just jumping around, and what was I using for raw material to jump around? F major scale, all of the notes that are legal. I would just kind of approach the end of a phrase or the beginning of a phrase by improvising. And by the way, that is improvising. That would count to me, if that were a project song of any of yours, and you decided to stick close to the melody and play with it like that, that would be perfectly fine. That would be a perfectly good way of doing it. Okay, that's all we're going to do with Honeysuckle Rose. Hopefully you will have absorbed some of the stuff, and you'll see that this stuff carries through all of the tunes, except a blues. And again, not to be repetitious, but a blues is a 12-bar form with a different kind of harmony. You can't approach the blues the way you approach a standard meaning that lots of people perform it, a standard tune like I've Got Rhythm or Honeysuckle Rose. Okay, Bro, can we keep going here? All right, I'm just going to talk about a few things just in general. I have semi-notes on it, that stuff that I want to say since this is our last get-together for this semester. Let me just remind you what is going to happen within the next 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks, even slightly more than 2 weeks. Within the next 2 weeks, you will be getting a final exam from me. I will be sending you a music file. And you know what it is. It's the very scary tune and word final exam. And I know I've sent you an endless email about it, but I'll just remind you what it is. You'll be getting a music file with a piece of music on it, an entire piece of music from some era and epoch of jazz history. You should know about all those eras because of the 5 documentaries, YouTube documentaries that I recommended that you watch. The thing might be from the song might be from the New Orleans era, the swing era, the big band era, the bebop era, the modern era, and even up into the 21st century. You'll have to try to identify what it is and tell me everything you can in a paper, maybe 3 pages worth of stuff. Use Wikipedia. I don't care. No footnotes. I don't need references. Just tell me what you think this thing might be. If you spend 3 pages of describing something that is totally wrong, but you can explain to me why you think it is what you think it is, and you're totally wrong, but if you can explain it to me, then you're totally right. I just need a 3-page, not an outline form. I'd like it relatively literate, as if it were a paper. But you have to tell me everything you can about the piece of music. Following the piece of music will be a word, and I want you to tell me everything you can about what that word has to do with this course. And I've given you some examples. So, for example, the song will end, there'll be a space, and then I will say drugs, or I will say the saxophone, or I will say the 30s, meaning the 1930s. And then you tell me everything about that word that you can come up with. Again, I don't need documentation, I don't need references, I don't need footnotes. Just tell me what you think, everything you can come up with about what that word has to do with this music. Hopefully I will not give you any of those 3 that I just mentioned. Okay, let me see how there are certain things. Oh yeah. All of you are really fine players, and all of you probably are the result of very good music programs in your public schools when you came up. I'll bet all of you had great high school jazz ensembles, and maybe some of you even had great middle school jazz ensembles. The reason that people your age, college students, come into a place like Holy Cross with such skills, such musical skills, such instrumental skills, and even such jazz interest and jazz skills, is because you probably had a great public school music education. And that's fantastic. That's very different from my era, when I grew up, and it's very different from what most jazz musicians experienced 20, 30, or 40 years ago. Jazz was still a relevant music in my time. No, in high school the Beatles were huge and rock and roll was huge, but I just had such an interest in jazz, and there was jazz to be heard if I was really interested. So I could go hear Louis Armstrong, which I did. I got his autograph. I could go hear Count Basie and Stan Kenton. These are all major names. I played with Chick Corea. I played with Anita O'Day. You may not know that name, but Anita O'Day is a very famous jazz vocalist in jazz history. She's incredibly significant. Those people were around when I was your age. I could hear them. I was influenced by them. They're not around. There are not jazz musicians around that like there were then. So, it's very possible that many of you have not listened to as many jazz players of your own instrument as I have on mine. It's very possible you've not heard players in person the way I had a chance to hear players play in person, famous players, great jazz players, players that inspired me. So, one of the things you should consider, is really finding someone that you love to listen to. If there is a secret to jazz, a very simple secret, it's 3 words that I'll give you right now. The secret to jazz. I keep joking that I'm going to give you the secret. Well, here is a secret. 3 words. Imitate, assimilate, create. What I did when I was in high school is I heard a saxophone player, I flipped over and I just played I learned to play every figure that he played. His name was Zoot Sims. Loved him, loved everything about him. I loved the way he played, I loved the way he swung, I loved the way he improvised. He was my idol. And when in my early 20s, I sounded like him. I wanted to sound like him. He was my idol. I imitated him. He was my kind of inspiration. Most jazz players back in my day, and I'm not sounding like freaking Fats Waller, not that day, I'm not going that far back, but in the 60s, if you were a jazz player, you were able to find enough players to listen to be inspired by. Later on, as I started to listen to other players, Zoot Sims was still one of my idols, but I really liked Michael Brecker. I stumbled across Cannonball Adderley, and he was my idol. And in other words, you need someone to listen to emulate. You need someone to copy. And as you copy someone when you improvise, you'll find more and more influences, and your playing style becomes your own. There were certain very famous jazz saxophone players. I'll name one. You won't know the name. Sonny Stitt. Sonny Stitt was a spectacular alto player. He idolized Charlie Parker. Idolized him. As most alto players did back in the 50s. Charlie Parker was the first great bebop genius. He was one of the first great saxophone geniuses. And everybody emulated him. They wanted to be like Charlie Parker, a brilliant, intellectual, technical wizard of a saxophone player. Sonny Stitt so idolized him that he sounded just like him through his whole career, and he couldn't escape it. Sonny Stitt, and this is not a negative, Sonny Stitt was a great jazz player, except he sounded like Charlie Parker from beginning to end. Every lick he played was a Charlie Parker lick. He couldn't escape it. He was trapped in by his own idol. And you know what he did to get out of it, that trap? He switched instruments. He went to tenor saxophone. He couldn't escape Charlie Parker on the alto, which was Charlie Parker's instrument. So he took up the tenor and sounded like a totally different player. And he ended up the remaining part of his career, he ended up playing tenor because he was his own person on the tenor. He couldn't escape Charlie Parker. So that was a sidebar I didn't intend. But you have to find someone that you really like to listen to, that inspires you, that steers you in a direction that you can finally call your own. And here's what I do, how I recommend it. You go on good old YouTube, and you Google something like, go on YouTube, something like top 50 jazz piano players. Anthony, this would be for you. And they will list them. They'll list them. Or go on Google and find the top 50 jazz players in jazz history. And Fats Waller will be on that list. But so will Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock. And then you just go on YouTube and listen to these people. Listen to the people that represent your own instrument. Listen to these piano players. And one of them will leap out at you. One of them will jump out at you, and you will say, "Wow, that's really interesting." My piano playing idol is Chick Corea, but I love Herbie Hancock and Oscar Peterson. Now, these might be names that you might be vaguely familiar with, but maybe not locked into them. Study them. Vocals, Holly, Adam. There are so many great vocalists. Some of them I mentioned, Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, but there are modern vocalists, Diana Krall, Kurt Elling. Listen to Kurt Elling. You will freak over him. I have said freak twice. You will be very impressed with this jazz singer, Kurt Elling. All of your instruments have specialists. Man, you know who they are, the people I've just mentioned. Charlie Parker and Cannonball Adderley especially. Kerry, Miles, Dizzy Gillespie, Chris Botti. Not a lot, but Chris Botti's got a beautiful sound. There are modern players on all of your instruments. Vibes, Mike Manieri, great vibe player. Milt Jackson. These are fairly modern. Mike Manieri and Milt Jackson are contemporary-ish, but you can go farther back to Lionel Hampton. All of your instruments, I won't go through them all, but you can find them all on Google, and then you can find them all on YouTube. Let me see if I've said everything I need to say. I think I have right now. What we're going to do, how many minutes did you say, bro? 15 minutes. Okay, what we are going to do is talk one last time about, you guessed it, I've Got Rhythm. And we'll do that very quickly, but we will take a break right this second, and I'll be back before you know it, everyone. Okay? Bye. Good, I'm just going to talk. Welcome back, everyone. I know this is a tedious time for all of us. This is my brother's studio, film studio, and it's way up the pike from Worcester. And driving up here, as you know, there's nothing on the road but semis and 18-wheelers, and it's just a totally weird time for all of us. But hopefully things will get better. And at least you're coming to the end of your semester with all of the online classes that you must have been taking. I just want to finish the details on how this class is going to finish, what is expected. I already mentioned your final, which is the tune and word music file, which I'm going to text you. You'll get it on a text. And I'm not going to repeat what I just told you before, but you have to write me a paper. It doesn't have to be the famous 10-page paper of Holy Cross. It can just be to tell me what you can and what you can research about the piece of music and the word, and then email it back to me. Usually in real life, I would always ask for a hard copy. I like to read these things off paper. Email's going to be fine. I already let you know that you've done fine, all of you, on the midterm, which we did online, strangely enough. That you all did the midterm after school was closed, and you all got it to me in variously interesting ways, and you all did fine, and I've let you know that already. So what you have to do for me now is that tune and word, and the way that you would have set up your final project. And I already sent you that on email too, but I will review it right now. You know how we did it last semester. You had to be prepared to play with Ben Cook or Tom Lamarck or Peter Koutrimos or Jim Gwynn, all great players, whoever they were. I think it was Tommy and Peter and Jim for you last time. And you had to tell them what you wanted to do with your project song. And each of your project songs last semester were individual. Each of you had your own thing, and you all did your own thing. Now, you don't. Your project song is I've Got Rhythm. You're all going to be doing that as your project song. And the great thing about it is you don't even have to do it. We're not going to do a final project with anybody, thanks to COVID-19. But you have to tell me how you would do it if you were going to do it, and you have to send that to me via email too. Let me give you an example. Hi, everybody.
Just take the time. Let me give you an example. Stop. Just remember that.
Okay, let me give you an example. Hi everyone, Tom Lamarck, Jim
Start
Gwynn.
again, just give me let me give you an example, you don't have to start recording, just, I'm on your face now, go ahead.
Do what?
Just start over, let me give you an example.
Okay, let me give you an example. I'm now going to pretend I'm talking to our guest players. I'm going to say, hi everybody, my project song is I've Got Rhythm, and here's how I want to do it. I'm going to play the melody one time, then I'd like the piano player to take 2 choruses, improvised, then I'd like the bass player to take 1 chorus, then I would like to trade 4s with the drummer. I'll start for 1 whole chorus, then I'll come back in with the melody, and we'll tag the last 4 bars. That's my final project. Now, you remember doing it that way last semester. What I want you to do on paper is write that same thing down, but don't do what I just said. And don't do the example that I gave you when I emailed you that endlessly long instruction email about final projects. What I need from you is something like this. Melody 1 time, 1x. Piano chorus 2 times. Bass solo 1 time, 1x. Do it in outline form, just like you did last year, last semester. But try to come up with some ideas that are different than anything I've just said or anything that we've done. Now, what are the possibilities? Hi, everybody, mystery rhythm section. Here's my plan for my final project. I'm going to do a cadenza out front. Or, hi, everyone, I'd like a rhythm section vamp, and until I come in with the melody. You all know what these terms are because we've done them already. You know what a cadenza is. It's an unaccompanied solo of an indeterminate length, and you play it. And when you're through, you look at the rhythm section and bring them in. You count them in. But a cadenza is an unaccompanied solo that goes as long as you want it to. A vamp is simply a repetition of a couple of bars or even a chord until you bring the band in. So a vamp doesn't have a predetermined ending. I know you know this. A tag is a repetition of a last number of bars, even numbers. You can tag the last 2 bars. You could tag the last 4 bars. You can't tag the last 3 bars. You can, but it would sound really, 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 and really stupid. Even numbers. There are all kinds of things you can do, and it's up to you. Since we're not playing it, since none of you are going to be playing this is all hypothetical, this is all theoretical, you can really go out there. Hi, I'd like to play the first chorus in B flat, and then I would like to go up a whole step and the piano player play the next chorus in C, and then I'd like the bass player to play the next chorus in D. You can do anything you want. You can really go nuts, because you're not going to have to play it. But you do have to tell me what your final project would be, how it would be structured. And I need this on a piece of paper. And I need it in outline form. I don't need a thesis on this. I need, number 1, melody 1 time, me, whoever you are. 2 improvised choruses, me. 2 choruses of piano. I need the specificity of what you have in mind, and I need it done in outline form, and I need you to send it to me via email. This is part of your final requirements for this course. So let me just sum it up. What are the requirements for this course? Your tune and word final exam, and your hypothetical, theoretical, never to be played or never to be performed final project in an outline form, and I do need it via email. Those are the 2 requirements, and you're done. Now, to end this lecture, I'm going to play I've Got Rhythm. I'm going to play, and I'll tell you how I'm going to do it. I'm going to start with a cadenza featuring myself, and then I'll make sure that I'm queued up here. Whoops, I queued myself right out of it. Whoops, don't be stupid. Here we go. Sorry about this. We're good. I'm going to play a cadenza. Then the rhythm section will come in, and I'll play one chorus of the melody. Then I'll take 2 courses of improvisation, and then I'm not going to give anybody anything else. I'm going to take the melody out. So you're going to get 4 choruses of I've got rhythm, melody, 2 improvisations, and I will try to suggest things in my improv that'll give you some ideas. What I hopefully will do will play an idea that I will be able to develop and work on. If I have 2 choruses, I'm going to probably start the first chorus on the lower part of the horn so I have a place to go. I want to build my solo somewhere. At the end of my second improvised chorus, I'm going to try to wind it down so I can ease my way back into the melody. And then I will take the melody right out, pull the saxophone out of my mouth, and stop this. So you know what my project is. Melody, 2 choruses of me, and 1 chorus of the melody, and take it out, and I'm going to start with a cadenza. Let me just make sure we're cued. Nope. Okay. Sorry about that delay. Good. We're fine. Here it is, my famous cadenza. Now my cadenza is going to be in the key of B flat because that's what I've got rhythm is in. And I'm just going to improvise by myself. I'm going to have it come to a conclusion, and then I will reach over here and start the rhythm section. I made that a little bit shorter than I told you originally. I could come up with a lot of very fancy reasons why I did, but I haven't played saxophone in so long that my chops were just giving me some trouble. So I figured I'd end it sooner. And besides, that's fine. It's jazz. I'm making it up. Okay. That's the last you're going to hear from me, and I've got rhythm. So the next move is for me to hear from you, but I've got rhythm. The way you would do it if you were going to perform this. Okay. Before we end this all together, I know this has been an excruciating semester, has been for me. Very unnatural, very weird, very scary, very upsetting, very discombobulating, a million different things. I hope that you're all weathering it well and in good health. And just one quick reminder that I mentioned way back in a previous lecture. Those of you that are in school next year, assuming that school goes off as scheduled next year, are all welcome to do your final project for real at the end of next semester with the Improv 1 class, should it happen. And even you people that are graduating, Carrie, Sydney, if you're back in the area at any time, for the rest of your days, I should say, you're always welcome to come back and play with the improv class and in final projects. Okay, you know what you need to do? Tune and word final exam. Give me an idea of how you would do your final projects, and we will stop right there. I hope I see most of you next year, and you graduation people, I hope you have a great life, but I hope you come back to visit and play some more. All right, that's it. Bye for now.